Tuesday. Nice to see everybody. We are not going to jump up and down yet, because this is a very special workshop. How many of you guys read our email from this morning? Okay. And I'm suspecting that's why some of you are here, quite possibly. If you didn't, I'll give you the long and the short of that. Tonight is what we call our Legacy Edition workshop. We've never had a Legacy Edition workshop like we're doing tonight. So tonight is the first of its kind, and you guys are special, and you're going to be blessed for being here. So I want to thank you. This is a good day for all of you, and it's a really special day for me, and it's a very special day for my son, Dr. Josh. You see, 35 years ago, my dad, who suffered with debilitating migraine headaches, got his first adjustment. And that was the last of his headaches. It was such a life-changing experience for him that he was able to get off 7 of his medications. He started exercising, eating good, and he got his life back. Not only did he get his life back, I watched a dysfunctionally emotional human being become a normal, loving person. And so in the end, I got my dad back, and my mother got her husband back, the person that she fell in love with. And it really was life-changing. It was an amazing transformation. Become we all watched that. My brother watched it. He was on his way up to medical school. He had already taken the MCATs, and he was going to become a medical doctor. And bearing witness to that, he made a life-changing decision to go to chiropractic school. And he's been in Central Florida practicing for more than 25 years, changing lives just like we do here, to the tune of tens of thousands, untold numbers of families. How many lives have these changed? You've been to his office, yeah? And so many of you have come down from that way also. And so we've watched all this happen, and then, of course, last but not least, Dr. Josh, with me applying everything that I learned that was so life-changing for me, I wound up applying all that to my own family. As soon as, many of you guys know the story, as soon as Josh was born, we adjusted him, literally with his umbilical cord still attached. Everything that I have taught in these workshops for the past 31 plus years, our speaker tonight is living embodiment of that. He has known nothing different. Okay? He's never been to a doctor's office for a medical treatment. He's never had a prescription or over-the-counter drug. He was not vaccinated. He was not immunized. We chose to do this and raise our family in a way based on principles of health that are unchanging. And that's what I've always espoused, and I have always taught each of you who have been here, whether it's your first workshop or it's your 150th workshop. Some of you have been here for 20 some odd years. And what you know is that the more you come back to these workshops, what you see is you have the confidence to have intelligent communication and conversations with your doctors, who as you get older, they don't give you less medications, they give you what? More. Yeah. And because of that, you wind up having side effects. You go to more doctors, go to more hospitals. So most of you here don't want that. So we teach what to do to help to reduce those adverse events from happening. And many of you, we have seen the fruit of that labor. And so Dr. Josh, as I said, he literally is the walking embodiment of everything that I espouse and I've preached and taught over the years. So he is overly qualified, not just being that he has a degree in biblical studies, but not only does he know God's word, but he knows God's laws of health and healing as well. So I'm excited for him to stand up tonight here and share with you and lead you in a way for you to make better decisions with your health. And a year from now, you're going to be all the better for it. A year from now, you're going to be a year older, but you're going to be a year healthier. And God willing, the year after that, the year after that, the year after that. The show goes on. And so tonight, I pass the torch to Dr. Josh Yachter. Now we there we go. Yep. Woo! Now we're having fun. All right. Thank you guys. You can take a seat. Thank you, Dr. Yachter. And I'd like to start off with a thank you for him and for the staff for keeping this office running and growing the way it has been to keep these workshops going. I just want to start off with a huge thank you for them. Could you join me with that? I want to congratulate a few more people here tonight. We have some guests. If you could raise your hand. Are we in the back? There we are. Can we welcome our guests, please? All right. Now, our topic for tonight is building a titanium immune system. And he gave plenty of introduction to show why I have some experience with that. But I also have the education now and want to share that. And these workshops are my favorite part of this office. Aside from the adjusting, the workshops, like you said, it's where we get the information to take to our own doctors and to have our own understanding and perspective of what to do when we have to make a medical decision. So how do we get our own perspective when there are so many out there? And this is something that I wanted to point out at the very start. Now, before we go over that, I'd like to remind everyone, our topic for next month is going to be heart health. After discussing the immune system, the cardiovascular system, the system of the heart, plays a huge role in maintaining the immune system. So they play hand in hand, and we want to really encourage you guys after tonight to sign up for that workshop. So I was talking about perspective and how we can have our own in today when there is so much information online, there are so many doctors and hospitals and federal agencies with opinions and facts that it's a lot to go through. And how do we grow our own perspective? What I know from my undergraduate experience, like my dad was saying in biblical studies and philosophy, that was driven mostly by context. This button, there we go. All right. Now, for us to have our own perspective, we need context. And there's right and wrong context, but the general understanding of what we're learning. So we're learning about the immune system tonight. So we're going to start with everything that we know about the immune system, work our way down to the facts, and then on the other side, show a chiropractic perspective. But my main goal is so that everyone here has their own perspective. And we do that, lastly, I have the word there, conviction. Because once we have our own perspective, we have to do something with it. Or else it's this opinion that maybe gnaws at us, like everybody should be doing this or that to be healthier, and don't apply it. But we ourselves must apply and have the conviction to use this information. So, to start with the immune system, I'll ask the question, what is the number one factor that affects immune system health? And if I could get another battery for this remote, that would be very helpful. Here we go. So we have many things that can affect the immune system. The first one on that list is chronic stress. So if we're asking the question, the number one factor affecting immune health, if I was to choose on this list, thank you. Oh, there we are. If I was to choose on this list, personally I would choose chronic stress because that does take up the majority of our thinking and ability to decide what's best for us. And we may put off the things that are necessary, such as a poor diet or physical activity, nutrient deficiency. And we also have things like poor hygiene or the substances that we willingly ingest that are toxic for ourselves. And
one that's very important I didn't know about until school, was the microbiome. All of the good bacteria that should be in our gut, using probiotics and foods that are fermented, things that allow our body to have its own ecosystem. And apparently, God created our body, thank you, with the ability to use that bacteria in our gut to know, okay, this is the good bacteria, but anything outside of that, we want to keep out. It uses that bacteria like a baseline almost. We also have a lack of sleep, which very drastically reduces the ability for the body to fight its own bacteria, to fight its own infections, excuse me. And lastly, are environmental toxins. All right, I have a backup remote. Let's try this one. So, environmental toxins are unique to each person. It could depend on the place of work or the lifestyle that they have. One example is in Flint, Michigan, with the lead piping of the water that became toxic for the residents of that community, or even the lead in our walls, in the paint. So these are things that we live in times where we watch out for those things and don't struggle with things like poor sewage or clean water. So we are doing pretty well with environmental toxins. But down here at the bottom, we have a big one, and that is medications and vaccinations. Could this be the number one factor affecting our immune health amongst all the others? And most people, I would say, would be yes, because everybody gets vaccinated, and most people are taking their medications to prevent what they were told they have. But I would like to show a video right now and give context to why people automatically go to vaccinations or medications.
Why I've chosen the Protect-A-Cell vaccine, but really, it just comes down to one. I'm smart. Smart enough to know that when a major pharmaceutical company tells me to take a drug that's long-term effectiveness is unproven, I should just trust them. Why? Because smart girls do what they're told, and they don't ask questions, especially about stuff that happens down there. So be a smart girl and check out the Protect-A-Cell vaccine. Go see a doctor. Ask if Protect-A-Cell is right for you. What are you waiting for? Do you need a ride? Because I can drive you. Or I'll pay for the cab. The drug company reimburses me. Did I mention that you get free juice and cookies afterwards? What's your address? Because I could just come over and inject you myself.
Just be a smart girl and get it.
I don't know if anybody remembers Gardasil. That was a satire, a spoof on that, and it dramatizes the emotional, very emotional, the emotional games that are played in these advertisements, similar to a beer commercial or things that aren't inherently good for us, but they show the emotional side of it. Running on a beach, playing volleyball, and they're all skinny. It's an emotional play, and it's something that is really only allowed in the United States and New Zealand to publicly advertise for medications. So because of this encouragement, another word for it could be propaganda, the United States is only 5% of the world's population and currently consumes 50% of all pharmaceutical drugs in the world. Now that is a lot of money. So to put that in perspective, we have Americans spending $400 billion on drugs last year. And if you were here last year for the Immune System Workshop, it was at $300 billion. This is at an increasing rate. Now, of that $400 billion, the amount that was used for advertisements was 80%. And I would imagine if somebody's collecting so much money for a product, the money would be spent on the research and development to make it a good product and not so much on the advertisement, as if there's a compensation for the lack of it functioning like it's supposed to, if that makes sense. And lastly, it brings into the question, is it for our health or for their profit? Now, this was just on drugs alone. No vaccinations, surgeries, hospital visit hours, and that is still a lot of money. That we're seeing not just in TV commercials, we're seeing it in the news, we're seeing it if you look up on Google how to help chest pain. Those ads that come up first on Google, that's paid for by Big Pharma, and that's where their budget goes. So it's influencing us to think that these are good decisions. So it goes to show that the problem is not what we're taking, but poor thinking that results in what we take. And like we said from the beginning, we're looking to add context to gain our own perspective and then to have the conviction to make the right decisions. So, if we look at the facts, it's easy to see the side effects label of a medication and be able to read, oh, I could experience all of these. But then to see a cold fact coming out of the National Journal of Cancer Research, it showed that women who are taking one ibuprofen daily for 5 years had an increase of breast cancer by 50%. And then there's aspirin. There's a saying I've heard, if you take an aspirin a day, keep the doctor away. And that as well, taken daily for 5 years, increases a woman's risk of breast cancer by 80%. Now this is not just causing breast cancer specifically, it is a general destruction of the immune system. And how do we, here we are. How do we know what direction is correct? I think this is probably one of the most important things I'll cover tonight, and this is the symbols that we used. Last year, if you were here for the immune system workshop, do you remember the sheep that we used? It was symbolic of following the herd. In the stories, all the sheep are going where all the sheep are going. And also in the stories, there's the shepherd who's leading the sheep. And often, you can see the tool of that shepherd is the cane. So if we know what the shepherd is using to corral the sheep, then we can better determine what kind of shepherd they are. So if we look at all of the different, I'm still speaking in an analogy mostly, if we're looking at all of the shepherds that are leading the sheep, we have news programs, we have commercials, and we even have doctor's visits at the doctor's office where the doctor themselves are encouraged by the federal agencies that sponsor each department that they get a raise or a bonus if they put so many people on a specific medication or a vaccination. That was especially apparent in the COVID pandemic, where doctors were given bonuses for putting people on ventilators, respirators, and vaccines and medications like Paxlovid. Now, with all of these shepherds out there, I tried to find the best example of the biggest shepherd with the biggest cane. So this is the example that we found. Oh, it was supposed to be a video. Here we go.
Excuse. No excuse for anyone being unvaccinated. This continues to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
A pandemic and an outbreak of the unvaccinated.
This is really becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
A pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
So that tool was passed around to a lot of different shepherds, and they all were in lockstep pretty much. But this is obviously specific to the administration at the time, who had their motives to encourage people to take a vaccination. and they weren't giving facts. The WHO, the government agencies responsible for this were not giving us the full facts. They were giving us a nudge or an opinion or what they think is the quickest way to encourage the most people to do what they would like. But if we look at the results, the people who took the COVID vaccine in 2022, and this comes from a German study from Andreas Hope, PhD in toxicology, and showed that those who did get the COVID vaccine were 18% more likely to get COVID than the unvaccinated, and their infections were more severe. And the vaccinated participants also report being diagnosed with new chronic health problems at 2.5 times, 250% higher than the unvaccinated. So it was not only causing more rates of infection, but all of the things that somebody had before they were infected, such as premetabolic syndrome or headaches, fatigue, that all was increased because the body is now fighting an artificial pathogen, It's an artificial vaccine versus the natural virus that was in the world. Once we take the vaccine, our body fights that virus, that artificial virus, and then on top of that, fights the natural virus. And along with that artificial vaccine virus comes all of the ingredients that are in that vaccine that also play a part, which we will get into in a moment. But before we did that, I'd like to close with that shepherd analogy and give some recommendations for you all to watch and decide on your own if you'd like more information. These are some videos that I've put together that I've watched and very much encourage for each person here. If you take a picture of it and are able to look these words up in Google, they will give you the videos that are there. The one on the very top came out very recently, and it's very accurate to modern data. The second one is from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has a lot of experience in suing agencies for using metal in vaccines or other ingredients that are harmful. And then lastly, there is a pediatric doctor who we will also talk about later, who came out with a movie called the 1986 Act, which is about an event in November of 1986 where the government said that the American population is no longer allowed to litigate or to sue the vaccine companies for any adverse reactions whatsoever. And there is one other act like that of its kind, and it's for the military-industrial complex. You're not allowed to sue America for all of the war that they have, that they make, and the machines that they make for it. And you're not allowed to sue America for the vaccines they create. Those are the only two that you're not allowed to sue, technically. So that last video, you do have to pay for it. The other two are free. But I have a phrase at the top that I love I found it a few years back, but I love it. There was a Greek philosopher named Pericles who said that if you don't take an interest in politics, politics will take an interest in you. And that's very true about healthcare today. That if we don't take an interest in our own health, healthcare does take an interest in us. And our preparation, our context, and our perspective is our preparation for that. So, the next step to seeing how exactly we approach sickness, if not vaccines and the medical complex, where do we turn? And it turns out we don't turn anywhere. We stay right where we are. We let the fever ride because the symptoms, the fever, that is the cure. The Johns Hopkins School of Medicine did a great study that clearly laid out fevers fight virus and bacteria, and specifically, if a fever is over 104 degrees, diseases are shortened by letting the fever run its course. And next, the sniffles, sneezes, coughs, and fever, they're good for you. They clear the airways of harmful irritants and allergy-causing substances. Coughing rids the body of bacteria as well. by way of the lungs. If you take a fever-reducing medication or something like Mucinex, the body has so many things set up that it needs to be done, like to purge with the heat that it has, purge all the bad cells and bacteria. And then at certain degrees of your fever, like at 102, bacteria are killed. And at 103, viruses are killed. And then at 104, the body produces interferon, interleukin, and cytokines, which is something that you'd pay thousands of dollars for if you received them at a hospital. Interferon that the body makes to target cells specifically and kill them. It's all in our body from day one, and it knows what to do. So lastly, there was one more, a specific example I had of not letting the body run its course. I learned this in undergrad, that the lungs have mucus for a reason, and it coats it and protects it during different weather and when we're running even. But if we don't have the mucus, and if we are sick, then what was it there in the first place for? Why keep the mucus and not take a Mucinex? Well, it turns out that when we have bacteria around us or viruses that we inhale, the mucus is there to catch and trap the bacteria. And if we don't have that mucus, it goes right into the lungs, right into the bloodstream, and it's so much easier to be infected if we reduce the mucus or try to reduce the cold. That specifically is a perfect example. Now next we have, here we are, a perspective on how vaccines, on the vaccine efficacy that we're told of. How effective are these vaccines? And this came from the American Journal of Infection in 2001, and they showed that there were a lot of experts that disagreed with the facts at the time. The largest historical decrease in deaths caused by infectious disease turned out not to be from the development of vaccines and antibiotics. It was because of the introduction of clean water and effective sewer systems. And many diseases and death rates already were on the decline before the availability of those vaccines had come out. Now we have a chart for this to show exactly when that happened. Starting in 1915 on the left, we have the measles disease, which was already on the decline, almost down to 2% of an infection rate, population-wise, before that vaccine was introduced. And the same is true with polio, and on the right is pertussis. And that is a fact that's claimed by many, many people and doctors that I know, who say that we have vaccines because they cure these diseases. We would still be fighting polio if we did not have the vaccine. And I show them this article. It's there, and it's true. But the idea that vaccines were the ones that stopped the infection from carrying on didn't turn out to be causation, but merely correlation. Because at that same time, 1950s to 1960s, we had an we had the industry to create clean water and clean sewage and clean food. And then we'll learn later on that the food today is still, we're working on getting our food back to proper nutrition. But as far as clean water goes, I think we're doing well. Now, next, for these vaccines, it's shocking how many people don't know what exactly are in these vaccines. So if we look at a list, on the left side, it's a quick summary. The total number of shots that children receive in childhood is 76, and I believe in 1965 it was 3 or 4. Now, every vaccine, just about every vaccine, has these basic components, which each one has their own function for that vaccine. The first two that are the most important are the heavy metals. These are either aluminum or mercury. And many doctors today claim that vaccines no longer have mercury, and they are correct, But there's a type of mercury called ethyl mercury or thimerosal that isn't technically a complete mercury, but is a form of it. And aluminum as well, which acts the same way and collects in the same part of the body. The part of our brain that has the most nerves and is the most sensitive and complex is the cerebellum in the back. It's responsible for balance, coordination, everything that happens in the background. That's why it's the most complex part of the brain. And that's where these heavy metals end up. We first learned that by dissecting monkeys after they were injected with these vaccines, and then it found to be true in humans. Now, in addition to these, there are things I can't explain why they would have monosodium glutamate in there. They say it's a preservative, but we know in our food that's a neurotoxin that gets us addicted to the chemical. We also have formaldehyde at the bottom, which I got used to in chiropractic school when we were examining the cadavers they had there. That's the chemical that they use to preserve dead bodies, and that's in the vaccines. And we also have human and animal cells. They show that the stem cells, or the formation of young cells in both humans and animals, help the preservation of that vaccine. And that's an important one that we'll get back to on the next slide. Excuse me, the slide after this. So this is one example of a vaccine that is on the list for every child to have. And this is the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. This is the pediatrician who made that movie, the 1986 Act, where people are no longer able to sue vaccine companies. And he was very passionate about what he saw in the child's office, in his pediatric clinic. He saw kids developing diseases, cognitive disabilities like autism, that didn't have it beforehand. And children are supposed to be vaccinated from birth up until 16 years. And in that time, he saw his patients just suddenly change and wanted to know why. And that was, he found that this, specifically the MMR vaccine, is a combination of three. It stands for the measles vaccine, the mumps vaccine, and the rubella vaccine. And those three combined interfere with each other, causing an inflammatory bowel disease, which can lead to Crohn's disease and autism in children. And the likely cause of that is the metal collecting in the brain. Now, we have proof of how many people have these adverse reactions. Well, at least as many as the people do say something. Some people might not say anything at all and think that it's bad luck or something to that effect when this information exists. The VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, shows about every year 11,000 adverse events and 110 deaths from vaccines. So, my big question is, why? I wanted to know this in school, like nothing else, because I had avoided all these, but there were people I know who got a full vaccine schedule and were completely okay. Or their argument, my friend's argument to me is, well, I'm just not sick because everybody else is protected. So if everybody's vaccinated and they rid themselves of getting sick, then they're not going to infect me. Then they're not going to get polio or tetanus or measles if they're infected. So what I learned is, and I'm going to share this with you as well, this is a chart of every vaccine that is required for a child. All 76 from birth to 16 years. And if you want to access this chart on your own, this link right here will take you to it. But what this is showing is the vertical column on the far left are all of the vaccines that are scheduled for children. And I can even, excuse me. There we go. And the first one there is hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is a disease that only is transferred to another person through using a needle, or using a needle someone else has used, and that person has hepatitis B, or if you have homosexual relations. Those are the only ways that hepatitis B can be contracted in somebody. And we are giving babies a vaccine for this disease at 1 day old. Now, there should be some reason for this. Doctors will say a kid could step on a needle at a playground. Okay. And if they're asked how many events have they seen like that, how many of those cases exist of a child getting hepatitis B from stepping on a needle at a playground, and it's none. And second to that is it's a precaution. Well, that then implies a risk to benefit ratio. If it's a precaution, then I should have a good benefit for taking this risk of getting a vaccine. So the way that what I learned is the way to tell is on these red lines right here, the vertical columns that are checking to see if the vaccine has been long-term trialed, if they've looked at their patients for years after they get the vaccine to make sure nothing bad happens, or if they've done a placebo trial where they say they give you the vaccine but they don't, and then compare you with people who did. And that's the way that every clinical trial is done on any medication. And if I zoom out here, you might notice that every vaccine on this schedule, with an exception to 2, have been under 0 trials for long-term effectiveness or danger. So it's a crapshoot. And that is the exact reason why it's dangerous. Not for all the ingredients that are in it, I can explain those all day, but the fact that they have not tried them, to examine the people that they inject past 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 5, we don't know what's going to happen to people who are getting these vaccines. Now, if we want to avoid this, like my dad, like Dr. Yachter was saying in the very beginning, he did something called a religious exemption for each one of these. And you only have to fill one out. But on the Florida Health website, you can find form DH681 and explain to the government why you would not like to have these vaccines injected into your child. In most states, they allow these. In Florida, we are lucky to have that. But as far as free will and the pursuit of happiness goes, I'm thankful for this. Now, we have long-term consequences as well. This is the last slide, and then we're finished with vaccines. But I thank you for bearing with that, because it's a lot of accurate information that is hard to correlate with it being the norm today. But lastly, the long-term consequences. The very thing that we don't know about the vaccines is that there is repeated, if somebody is repeatedly vaccinated, and there are 76 for each person, it increases the risk of repeated infection, and due to long-term effects that's due to long-term effects of weakening the immune system. And getting infection naturally shows to strengthen the immune system and decreases the risk of being reinfected. And it's something called herd immunity, or natural immunity. Now, I'm going to have to cut this a little short. I need to make sure that this stays an hour long. But for the sake of giving an example of how media companies will use their tools to corral the sheep, I found that during 2020 through 2023, if you tried to find anything online about natural immunity or herd immunity, it was taken off of the internet. You couldn't put a hashtag natural immunity or anything like that, because the idea itself was dangerous for the healthcare system at the time. We couldn't have anybody rebelling or anything like that. So all of this to show that, number one, we're focusing tonight on context, on knowledge, and then we have perspective. So I think from that information we can gain a good perspective, a sure perspective of what we should not walk to. And now I'll give the chiropractic perspective, which starts with the conception. I would start there. When we're born, the first thing to develop in the human body is the nervous system. Nothing else can form or function without nerves going to it to both communicate and give function to. And if you look in any dictionary for a definition of health, it will be complete 100% function. So that implies that if we do not have 100% function of the nervous system, and if the nervous system controls everything, then we do not have 100% function of our body. And the best example, my dad showed me, Dr. Yachter, I'm going to get that. Dr. Yachter,
It's okay.
all right.
You can call me that.
Dr. Yachter showed me this example a while ago, and I think it clears everything up with just one great question. Can you adjust a dead person? I know he says that a lot, but the idea of adjusting a dead person is not just to move the bone, but you want to move the bone to allow the nerves that are inside the spine to breathe and be able to communicate and function. Now, sure, a dead person has a nervous system, but the very thing that animates the human body isn't the nervous system itself, because a dead person has that too. It's the beginning of conception at life, when we have that spark, the flash of light that you can see online. If you look up a cell dividing, there's that flash of light in the beginning. That's why it's called subluxation. Lux means light. We have light and energy in our nervous system, and the vitality of that energy determines if we can function properly with our nervous system. So how do we know if we have a functioning nervous system? Chiropractors know very well, it turns out, because we have a lot of ways to know where the nervous system is not working properly. So this is an example of the low back. These are 3 bones of the spine, and inside that spine is the spinal column. The brain is the same as the spinal column and vice versa. We've just got a lot more nerves up here, and it uses the spine as its highway to control everything else. And if any of those bones are pinching on any of those nerves, then that is how we see a reduction in nerve function. It's that same feeling of sciatica. If anybody has had that, it's this static feeling. Like there should be a connection, but my antenna isn't right. And it's literal electricity that forms a magnetic field. It's physics. So when we have proper nerve function, that's when we have full 100% health. And this, sticking with the immune system theme tonight, this is a great study on the right by Dr. Ronald Perot, showing the immune system of cancer patients, also the immune systems of non-cancer patients, and then third, the immune systems of non-cancer patients under chiropractic care. Comparing all those 3, the people who received chiropractic care had immune systems stronger on average by 3 times, 300%. And on the left here is another doctor from Seattle, 1997, that showed that head and neck posture is a major factor in the fatigue and immune function. And this was in patients suffering with fibromyalgia. And fibromyalgia is a disease where the nervous system is already weak to begin with. And somehow, even with chiropractic, people who have a weak nervous system can still find an improvement in their function. I thought that was an incredible article. Now, after that, we have the types of ways that we can receive a subluxation. And I like to say there are the thoughts, traumas, and toxins, and those traumas start from day 1 when we're out of the birth canal. Now this is it looks like a C-section birth, and it turns out a C-section birth is a smaller birth canal than a natural birth. And to get a baby out of the birth canal, the mother is laid on a bed, face up. But if you look at the anatomy of human beings, the pelvis is widest when we are in a squatting stance. Just like every other being created by God, you squat. This is a natural emission of the baby that is painless and doesn't separate the head from the baby's body when you're trying to get it out of the birth canal. When we're doing that, we're taking a housing shell and then the spinal cord that's inside, and we're pulling the head, and the spinal cord is coming with it. And that torsion is what will weaken the immune system and can even lead to, goodness, if you've heard of something called SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, many cases were found, a lot of chiropractors did research on sudden infant death syndrome and found that the amount of force that's used to pull a baby out of the birth canal can range from 60 to 95 pounds. And that baby weighs an average of 8 to 10. So, I should have included that research paper. This one specifically, excuse me, this one specifically is studying 1,000 infants from birth trauma. And the study showed that infants who were adjusted showed to have improvement with colic, restlessness, fever, and seizures. And Dr. Gutman concluded that abnormal nerve function leads to a lowered immune system and also is a causative factor for ear infections and tonsillitis. And what do people do when they have tonsillitis? They take it out. Remove the tonsils. What do? Our appendix is aggravating us. Remove the appendix. So, rather than looking for ways to remove something or add something because we're not having enough function, the chiropractic perspective begins with what we were given from the start. A nervous system that controls a body that is prepared for any function or disease that wants to harm our body. Lastly, there we are. Not lastly, but HIV, we're almost there. HIV and AIDS research showed that those who received upper cervical chiropractic care, this is at the very top of the neck, showed a 48% increase in CD4 immune system white blood cells. Those are specialized green beret cells ready to go through every part of the body and kill the worst bacteria. And those who did not receive chiropractic care did not. So that was a 48% increase in the immune system's function. Now, the question to ask there is, the next time we have a sneeze or a cough or a flu, what do we do? Do we put an ice pack on our head and keep the fever down? Or do we go to the doctor and try to get the Dramamine to keep it down, or the NyQuil to end it all quickly? Then what is the most important thing that you can do to maintain our immune system? And that would be to get adjusted. So, what are the causes of these subluxations? We covered that already. And even in daily life, things like slips, falls, traumas, all add up to our spine slowly being malpositioned, out of place. Because we were given the structure, but using that structure is what causes it to weaken. And we strengthen that by passively putting the bones in the proper position so that when these subluxations happen and we're pinching on nerves, we can remove those. So, moving from there, what are the things that we can start today to help with our immune system and build the titanium immune system? So we mentioned chiropractic care already, and I'd like to point this out in comparison to what we started with all of the advertisements and the news commercials the news and the commercials that we'll see that are so focused on the emotion but look away from the facts. And this is just looking at the facts. Chiropractors have 60.2% fewer hospital visits, 62% fewer surgeries, 85% fewer pharmaceutical costs, and overall, a study of 311 chiropractic patients who were 65 and older who received maintenance care for 5 years or longer. These were their results. 60% fewer hospital visits, the surgeries, and 85% fewer pharmaceutical costs. Now, this was a picture that we took a few years back, and each person in that picture, all the children, are just like myself and my brother who's here tonight. we have all avoided those vaccines, but also on the opposite side have used chiropractic care and seen the benefit from it, and can tell you from personal experience that once I finished college, undergraduate school, that was the last time that I had gotten sick. And I would get sick one time a year, just about every September when the cold weather would come around South Carolina. And my body was running its fevers when they came. I would either sit outside or bundle in a blanket and let the fever ride. And the logic for that is, when my body is able to heal completely when it needs to, then it doesn't have to do it again in the future if it did it right the first time.
That's right.
So, we have a testimonial from a patient. I'm going to turn it up because it is a little difficult to hear, but we're asking him his experience using chiropractic care, and then he goes right on to his talking about his immune system and how he saw such an improvement, which he never expected. Here we go.
How are you, Marklin? So, you're giving me an amazing praise report. How long have you been a patient here now?
Since July of 2008.
And what did you originally come in for?
I came in because I was having problems with my blood pressure.
And what were the results after care?
After care, blood pressure has normalized.
Excellent. Were you on medication?
Yes, I was.
Are you on medication now?
No, I'm not.
Excellent, excellent. And what other benefits have you noticed since you've been under care?
I have not been sick and legitimately since 2008, since I started care in this office. Also, I have a few sniffles that are go quickly. I have not been sick.
I mean, before, is it something that was very common? Were you getting colds and sicknesses?
Yes.
As a teacher, you're around that a lot, especially with kids.
Yes, and then in the winter months, it gets colder, I would get sniffles, and I've not had that. As a matter of fact, I was in New York in the snow, and I got almost warm. I came back, no problem whatsoever.
That's great. That's a sign of a healthy immune system and a healthy future.
Yes.
Keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ricardo, stand up.
Stand up.
Take a bow. Take a bow. He looks better in the video because it was 15 years ago. He still hasn't gotten sick, but once.
It's a great time to come today.
Twice in the past 15 years.
Twice in 15 years. Yeah.
Twice in the past 15 years. That's incredible. And what is that worth as well? The value of that is incredible. So, to go over how exactly chiropractors know. Yes, absolutely.
I have something that's
Sure.
one of the times I was sick. I tell my students this all the time. I was in school and I felt horrible, and I like red velvet cake, and they brought it to me. I couldn't have anything, and I just could made it through the day, and it was just terrible. So I went home and I needed to sleep, and when I got up, maybe like 3 hours, I was so hot. You probably could boil some water on me. So I remember Dr. Yachter, so I just covered up even more. And when I got up the next morning, the fever was gone, and I've never had a fever since then. And
That's
this was
amazing.
20 years.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And that is using context and a perspective to make the right decisions. Because when we are sick, what is our conviction at that moment? To reduce it, to feel better because I don't want to feel like this, or to know that it's better for me in the long run. Because my body, though it is doing something I don't understand, I also don't understand how I'm here and how I'm talking to you guys right now. And things are a little more complex than we like to think. So when we do have a fever, our body knows what it's doing. Now, how do chiropractors know where the nervous system is losing its effectiveness, where it's struggling? And we can target that by skin temperature, because skin temperature is controlled by the nervous system. So there on the left side, when we see those red lines at the bottom, we look at the chart in the middle and correlate what levels of the nervous system are at that location of the spine, and infer that the nervous system is also communicating to the intestines, the reproductive organs at that level. And so we know to watch out for things going on in that area if there's a lack of function or poor function, and can prevent that from happening if we've already seen the cause of it and haven't seen the symptoms yet. If somebody has neck pain that's affecting their heart or their lungs, we're not waiting until that happens. We're able to correct that from the beginning. Now, once we have the location from the temperature, we can then tell the specific position by X-ray. And this is what X-ray's gotten actually a lot, it's improved so much over the past 10 and 20 years that you can tell the exact position of a bone, where it should be going, and then use that to show us where to push the bone back into place. Now, we have this as number one to take action today, and we included that as number one because we are giving a discount tonight for the guests who are here who have never been checked by a chiropractor. We strongly, strongly encourage you to see them at the front desk afterwards because we are giving a discount on our first visit tonight, and only tonight. It will be for $97, and that will cover everything for the first appointment, including the x-rays, the NASA technology we use for the thermography, the consultation. Everything will be there for for those who have not seen a chiropractor before. We greatly encourage you. This is the opportunity and time to do that. Now, number two of things that we can do tonight that will help our immune systems is consistent sleep. Consistent sleep helps generally everything in the body, mostly the brain and the immune system. Now, if we have sufficient rest, that keeps our immune system at its highest functioning level. And the best type of sleep is cave-like darkness and as cold as we can put it. And research shows that 8 hours is the ideal time. And after sleep, we have consistent exercise. Most ideally in the morning, which takes a lot of time to get used to, but is what the body loves the most, this consistent exercise. Movement is health, is where I always say that that's where it truly is. We're our most healthiest, we are our most healthiest when we are moving, because the body is not a stagnant thing. Even when we're still, like everybody here, we're breathing, we're digesting, we're blinking, our body is pulsing blood through every part of our body, and we're always in motion. So the more motion that we have, the better our body functions. Lastly, we have consistent glucose levels. The biggest detriment to our immune system is the amount of sugar that we give it. Sugar, I'll read this first from the NIH. Although sugar is vital for the proper function of the immune system, their proliferation, a high amount of glucose may lead to impaired function of the immune system and pathological conditions. So it is true that our body does run off of sugar. And this is specifically talking about glucose, a very specific type of sugar. But when we have too much of it, our body gets used to burning quick fuel. And now when we give it good fuel, it's already trained to use the easy, quick fuel and to even crave it more. Things like simple carbs, sugars in our drinks, and even eating too much fruit can be bad at times from so much sugar. Now, on this next slide, we have a lot of examples of what that looks like. There we are. So, this does look like, I'm sure we recognize every single image in this image because it's common. We see it, and we see it so often that it sometimes seems like it's okay. That maybe I've been doing well for so long, maybe it wouldn't hurt every now and then. And just one time is all it takes for our body to remember what that's like and then to crave it more. I see some faces and people know what I'm talking about. But the biggest thing to point out here is there's one thing on this TV that was created by God, and the rest is an abomination by man. That would be the potatoes right there. So potatoes are great, but they're all sugar. And you can also, if you hear the word carb, you can just tie that right in with sugar. It is sugar. And our body uses carbs, but it loves good fats. When we have olive oil, when we have salmon, red meats, both proteins and good fats, that is a lean diet for a lean immune system. That is a huge improvement if we're able to avoid, toss out, and create a hatred for these things. Now, after that, we have to look at the good food. And that is, I've seen a few different ways of how to shop better. I think my favorite one is where there's you can probably find it online, an image of the arrows to follow at a grocery store, to walk the perimeter along the produce, dairy, deli, and stay away from all those aisles, maybe a couple condiments here and there. But if we're not walking through the aisles and being tempted, that makes this a lot easier. And one thing that I do have to mention as well is over time, like we mentioned at the beginning with the water and sewage systems that were improved, we are also seeing a decrease in the nutrients in our soil at the same time. So the food that we trust that is healthy to give us those nutrients are still lacking. And this is the last step for things that we can do now to build a titanium immune system, is to also become aware of not just the good food, but how good is our good food. And this comes from the United States Department of Agriculture. From 1900 to 2006, the mineral depletion in soil. That is a line that's following how many minerals, vitamins, nutrients are in our soil. And it is still decreasing. This chart was from 2006. So what do we do if we are serious about our health? Well, our recommendation here are supplements where you can find them. And the ones that we have here in the office that we are especially giving a discount for tonight, we want to offer that to you guys for being here tonight and taking time out of your day, to offer the Ultraplex D, the zinc, and the probiotics. And each one of these, I've highlighted how they specifically help the immune system. The Ultraplex D is for bones. The majority of people do know that. But some people don't know that our red blood cells are made in our bones, and also our immune cells as well. So if we do not have strong bones, we cannot produce the blood cells and the white blood cells to fight that bacteria. The zinc the body uses to create DNA to remember the bacteria that we've fought in the past, as well as communicate when they're in throughout our body. And lastly, the probiotics is the gut bacteria that I had mentioned at the very beginning, where our body has a filing system to know, okay, these are the good bacteria that don't harm us, that actually help us. There's a fact that 95% of serotonin is made in the gut by that gut bacteria. So it even improves mental function. But that is a huge help to the immune system as well. And all of these tonight are 15% off. Now, I'll move through that. Lastly, to one more thing. We wanted to throw this in as well for the 15% discount tonight. That is a general daily defense to keep your body ready for when it does come in contact with things. This is great to use extra before the holidays or before traveling, but something that we recommend as a daily use. And this includes things like vitamin A, vitamin C, B6, and 12, zinc, quercetin, turmeric, N-acetylcysteine, and green aqueous tea extract. I don't want to keep us here too long, but if I could summarize what these do, vitamins A and B allow us to create those new immune cells. Vitamin B12 helps us create those cells. So A and B are the parts, and B12 is what puts them together. We have zinc, which is the communication factor of our immune system and helps us with the DNA that remembers those bacteria. And then on the right side, we mostly have all the antioxidants and anti-inflammatory supplements that keep our body functioning at 100%. So this as well, we're adding to that 15% discount as a thank you for you guys being here tonight. And because we had covered that soil depletion, I'd like to make a note that if we are serious about our health, these supplements we recommend definitely, but if we're serious about our health, are almost a requirement because of what we see in our soil today. Now, we want to say a huge thank you to everyone for being here. We want to make sure you sign up for the Heart Smart Nutrition workshop coming up next month. And also, for anybody who's interested in starting their chiropractic care for that first visit, we ask that you stand up and go ahead and see the front desk first. And also, anybody interested in getting those supplements, you can see Deborah tomorrow at the front desk. And we thank you guys again. You all have a wonderful night, and stay well.